Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of VU Sports Wired, Vanderbilt Video Productions' premier sports talk show. My name is Bobby Kent, and I am your host. I am once again joined by Andrew Wilf, Deputy Sports Editor for the Vanderbilt Hustler, and Jonah Barbin, a staff writer. We will dive deep into football's tough loss against Alabama, as well as Vanderbilt soccer's big week, beating Kentucky and Missouri. First, we will start with football, where the Commodores were thoroughly defeated by the Crimson Tide at Bryant-Denny Stadium, losing 55-3. Vanderbilt is now 3-2 on the season and are coming off a much-needed bye week. Next up for the Commodores will be number 9 ranked and 5-0 Ole Miss at home at 3 p.m. Central this Saturday, October the 8th. As it's been over a week since the game, let's first remind ourselves of how Vanderbilt's loss against Alabama unfolded.
Football 3-1, taking on the undefeated 3-0 Alabama Crimson Tide at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa. Vanderbilt's first matchup with Alabama since 2017. Alabama had won 22 straight games against the Commodores coming in. On the game's first drive, Vanderbilt would force a punt after stopping Crimson Tide tight end Cameron Latu short of the sticks. The Commodores would get a good start from their defense on the road. Ensuing Vanderbilt possession, A.J. Swan motions out for Raymond Davis to take the Wildcat snap, and he would go nowhere, as linebacker Henry To'oto'o would get him for the loss of 4 yards. Vanderbilt forced to punt on their opening possession. Next Alabama possession, Bryce Young would make the Doors zone coverage pay, waiting in the pocket and throwing a laser to receiver Ja'Cory Brooks for the 21-yard score to cap off the 4-play Alabama drive. The Crimson Tide would take a 7-0 lead early in the game. Vanderbilt would start their response strong, A.J. Swan connecting on this lofted back shoulder throw to trusty target Will Shepard for 22 yards down to the Alabama 32. After a fresh set of downs, Vanderbilt's Raymond Davis would sneak to the outside and power forward for just enough to get the Vanderbilt first down. Commodores moving the ball early on Bama. The luck would not continue as A.J. Swan's pass intended for Jaden McGowan would be broken up. Vanderbilt would settle for a Jacob Bolvis field goal 7-3. Alabama would then march 75 yards down the field in 10 plays, highlighted by this strike from Young to Jermaine Burton for 24 yards to midfield. 7 plays later, Young drops back and finds Trayshawn Holden for 6 with a frozen rope into the left side of the end zone. Bama would jump out to a 14-3 lead. In a rather head-scratching decision, the Commodores would go for it on their own 34-yard line, needing 1 yard to convert. A.J. Swan could not evade All-American linebacker Will Anderson, who brings him down. Clark Lee might want that one back. It would take Bama one shot to extend the lead after the turnover on downs. Bryce Young looking left and firing to Ja'Cory Brooks, who gets up for the 34-yard score, 21-3 Bama. Later in the first half, Bama would cap off a 9-play drive with a Young screen pass to running back Jamar Gibbs, who would barely get in for the touchdown. Young would throw for 316 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first half. Late in the half, Vanderbilt would find itself punting following a 3-and-out, as Kool-Aid McKinstry for Bama would take it across the field and down the left sideline, but whoops! He gets the ball punched out by the Vanderbilt defense and recovered by the Doors. Unfortunately, Vanderbilt would be unable to capitalize before the end of the half on the Bama mistake. Bama would ice this game in the late third, Young handing off to Chase McClellan, who would make a Vanderbilt defender eat dirt on the way in for 6. 41-3 Bama. Vanderbilt would drop this contest 55-3, drop to 3-2 on the season. The Commodores next take on Ole Miss on October 8th.
Fellas, this game wasn't one of any of us nearly expected or necessarily expected the Commodores to win. However, we did talk last week about how there were opportunities to walk away from Bryant-Denny Stadium, quote, winners, without actually winning the game. Did the Commodores do enough to walk away, in your view, by an improvement definition, victorious? Andrew, let's start with you.
First quarter, absolutely, because the Commodores were down 7-3 with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. You saw a fight, and everyone was really excited. You said Swan was the guy. You're competing. Alabama didn't score in the first drive, and everyone was really excited. But then the defense started to deteriorate, and then they were on the field a lot. And when you lose like that, you can't look at the scoreboard, but look at the box score at the end of the game. The way Alabama's backup running back rushed for that big touchdown with like less than 2 minutes left, that's really unacceptable. Clark Lee said in the presser after the game, you just can't do anything like that. And I think that's why I see a loss, because you were playing okay, and then you kind of surrendered, and you didn't look like a Power 5 team. And there was never pressure on Bryce Young, and with A.J. Swan, I thought he actually didn't do anything bad, just no one could get open because you're playing against 5 stars on the defensive perimeter of the Crimson Tide.
Jonah, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I honestly see a win in some ways. Bryant-Denny Stadium, a night game at Bryant-Denny Stadium, is a place where people can crumble and have crumbled many times. A.J. Swan, in only his 3rd start as a Commodore, didn't do that. He held his own. He didn't do anything wildly impressive, but didn't throw an interception, wasn't turning the ball over, had a few nice completions to Will Sheppard. Will Sheppard was so impressive, even though his numbers weren't so crazy, about 50 yards, that Nick Saban actually complimented him in the postgame. So there was a nice connection between those two again, even against now the number 1 team in college football. Yeah, Bryce Young was back there grilling steaks. He had so much time. But this is the kind of things we expected. Will Anderson Jr. was in the backfield almost every play. But again, these are things that we would be surprised if they didn't happen. These are some of the best players in the nation, and someday will be some of the best players in the NFL. I took away a lot of positives, especially from A.J. Swan and guys who are going to have big futures on this team.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I agree with both of you. I think I kind of look at this as, first point scored against Bama since 2007, the first quarter field goal, so that's an improvement right there. But it was only a field goal, and that's all they got the entire game. And like you said, Jonah did not get any pressure on Bryce Young. Play calling was, I thought, pretty conservative at times. I did like the start to the game, and we'll get more into this. But, the defense allowed over 500 yards, which I guess, what are you to expect against Alabama? But, A.J. Swan had no turnovers, which we wanted to see, and he started 7 for 12 in the game. He made some nice passes, didn't look fazed by the atmosphere, and there were no major injuries. So, I'm happy about that, but I don't know really what there is to take from a game like this going forward. But I guess, like you said, Andrew, they didn't really finish the game the way that they had wanted to.
And I think going off of what Jonah's saying, I think kind of going off of that, even though you lose by 50 points, it still didn't feel like the 2021 team because there was a sense of fight, and right out of the gates there was fight. But I just want to jump forward a little bit. When Vanderbilt's on their own 35-yard line, when A.J. Swan had the ball, I think it was 21-7 at the time. And I actually really liked the play, but I believe that if Mike Wright was at the helm there, he gets scrambled there. And I think we were talking about a few weeks ago, they need to find ways to get Wright involved, and I think that's what they weren't able to do. Maybe when you're down, you can't do wildcat sets, but maybe when it's 4th and 1, you put Mike there, get the first down, and maybe it's a whole different ball game. And that's a really interesting thing to consider because once you lose the ball in your own 35, they scored, and I think Alabama had 5 straight touchdowns because the punter punted it when they were up 7-3, the first drive, and then punted it when they had 41 points. And that is such a big disparity, and the box score really showed the story of the game.
Definitely, yeah. Jonah, you think?
Yeah, look, I agree with Andrew. Any way to get Mike Wright involved because he is still an offensive weapon, even if A.J. Swan is the guy, and that's what it looks like he is at this point. Any way to get Wright involved would be good. I liked the call to go for it on 4th down. Honestly, anybody who's saying that punt it and get the field position, okay, so instead of 1 play down the field, Bryce Young has to throw 2 passes for the touchdown. I don't think it really mattered at that point. I do like the guts from Clark Lee. I would have liked to see him make A.J. Swan throw into some tighter pockets at some point and challenge him a little bit down the field. I get not wanting to kind of hurt your freshman's confidence, and he did it like that. Clark Lee didn't put him in any really uncomfortable situations, quick passes, but I think the only way to really get to a point where you're contending in these games instead of getting blown out every time, and that's the next step the Commodores have to take, contending in these games before we can actually think about competing and then winning, is to actually make those tough throws, even if we're getting picked off a couple times in the game. These are the growing pains that we need to go through to contend in the SEC.
Yeah, no, and, I do want to hone in a little bit more on the offensive game plan, right, because it was almost, it felt like there was a contradiction at times. It felt conservative in certain situations and not necessarily allowing A.J. Swan and the offense to really go for it and make those mistakes, but it was also aggressive, right, at certain moments, going for it on that 4th and 1, running a sweep with Raymond Davis to get that first down on that first drive for Vanderbilt. So it's interesting. What do you guys make of that sort of dichotomy a little bit of how Vanderbilt called this game offensively?
It's really hard to have a creative offensive plan when you're in Alabama at night, but they tried their best in the first drive. I think they kind of lost that when they started when the defense started allowing all these yards, because then there was pressing. When you're down 14-plus points in an SEC environment that isn't yours and it's Nick Saban's house, it's almost impossible to establish a passing game because you have to establish the run and then be able to do a play-action pass. So Vanderbilt became incredibly one-dimensional. And then when you would run, it was just like down the middle. You couldn't really do too many creative plays. I do really wish we did more, jet sweeps with the Jaden McGowan. Maybe like a flea flicker. And I know you don't want to get cute when you're down 50 points and when you're down 21 points, but you need to do something to spark this locker room. Give them, invigorate their souls, because after the field goal, they were just kind of dead the whole game and, playing on the defensive.
Definitely, yeah. No, I mean, I would agree with you on that. I mean, you got to do something, right? And it's a matter of what can you do, really, and what will be effective, because Alabama was kind of living in the backfield the whole game. Jonah, you mentioned Will Anderson was having his way, and he had a number of sacks. He's one of the nation's leaders in sacks. But I don't know what you really can do. I loved the beginning of the game, getting the ball out early out of A.J. Swan's hands, getting him settled into the game. Jaden McGowan on screen passes, getting him involved early. AJ, they did get it to Will Sheppard early too, which he's going against Alabama's best corner, and to still get it to him was encouraging. And you couldn't really do much on the run game because of the way that their front is constructed. So I don't know really what you can do, but I would have loved to see something that allows A.J. Swan to take a little bit more risks. And so what? He throws an interception. It's a talking point. You can learn from it. But I don't know what you can do, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think Clark Lee got maybe, and rightfully so, we as fans did too. I definitely felt it in the building. Andrew and I were both in attendance when Vanderbilt stopped Alabama for the first time, and then they drive down the field, they have a field goal. Maybe you're almost baited into thinking you can pull something off or keep this close. But the reality is, when we're playing a top 25 team, and forget top 25, when you're playing really now the number one team in the country, we still are at the phase where we have to play like we have nothing to lose and really just try things out. This is not a team we're going to contend with for 4 quarters, really, in any conditions. But I'd like to see, honestly, more aggressive play calling, going for it on 4th down. I felt like it was a little half-baked, aggressive at some moments, but not aggressive enough to the point where that indecision is, just going to be watching Bryce Young scoring a lot of touchdowns and not much else. And that's what they did, unfortunately. But I do think there were some learning points that the Commodores took away from this one.
And definitely, and speaking of the defense, what can they take away from a game like this? Were there true signs of progression or regression from the defense at moments in this game? Can we really take anything away from the defensive performance again in a game like this against the Tide at this point? Andrew, what do you think?
Right, and I talked about it in 3 matchups to watch. The Vanderbilt's biggest weakness is a lack of depth on their front 4. And you really saw that with the high-tempo offense in Alabama, these rotations, and Vanderbilt was putting just no pressure. I think Alabama had no sacks, had 628 yards on offense, and that's really concerning. And what's even worse is this was probably Alabama's most underwhelming wide receiver rooms in the past 6 years, because they lost all 3 of their starting receivers to the 2022 draft. So that was definitely frustrating. And look, the first drive was really, really good. I think there was a 4th and 20 that Alabama went for, or like a 4th and 10 that Alabama went for when they were up 14, and Vanderbilt stopped them. But besides that, there was just no defense, and they were just being, out schemed and out game planned, and really out skilled in every facet of the defense.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I don't even really look at the matchups in the secondary. I throw those out. I was watching Bryce Young as an observer in the stands for 7 seconds in the pocket, letting the play develop. I don't care if you have Sauce Gardner out there. You're not going to be able to guard a guy for that long at this level in Division I college football and going forward. Anthony Orji had 13 tackles. DeRicky Wright had 5. They forced that fumble on the punt. So there were moments where you saw little sparks from the defense. But like Andrew said, with the front 4, when you're getting no pressure on Bryce Young and not getting any sacks, not even really getting in the backfield, letting him sit back there and let these plays develop, you're going to have no chance. And that's something that Vanderbilt's going to have to work on going forward.
Definitely. And, they also, Alabama was able to systematically move their way down the field, right? Vanderbilt allowed about 9 yards per pass play and about 7 yards per rush. So, when Bama would run a play, it was most likely going to be successful, and it was most likely going to go for big yards, right? So, Bryce Young sat back there and was able to find chunk 15, 20-yard plays, complete passes to Jermaine Burton or give it off to Jahmyr Gibbs, who, had a slow start, but then he ended up running through the Vanderbilt defense. So, only 3 tackles for loss all game and played cover 3 defense and with sort of, and soft coverage on receivers, not really pressing up on them. It's a tough situation because you're trying to not allow the big play over the top, but then, by doing that, you're not getting the pressure necessarily. And you also have to wonder, can those guys get there? But I think you have to give them a chance to try, right, and do something different against Bryce Young. So it's interesting. Vanderbilt will definitely have things to look at going forward, and with big games coming up next against more SEC competition, will they be able to, adjust those things? So lastly, let's discuss what's ahead for Vandy. They're coming out of the bye week at 3-2 and have some tough games coming up. What adjustments should Vanderbilt and Clark Lee make to best prepare themselves for the remainder of the season? And what are the keys to victory, in your guys' view, to competing against Ole Miss?
Ole Miss, they played a phenomenal game against Kentucky. They played a complete 4 quarters, and what I saw was just a complete team. I want Vanderbilt to establish the run game with Davis, but really their entire backfield. Patrick Smith is back. Rocco Griffin. Betts Paulette. I know he doesn't really play that much, but Gillespie. Those are 5 really, really talented, fast guys. Get them in space. Get them involved. And I think Vanderbilt, there's really a correlation. When the Commodores establish a run game, they just play a better offensive game. And then I want to see a little bit more discipline from the defensive line. Not as many penalties with jumping. Maybe more blitzing. Get them in 2nd and 10, 2nd and 12 situations, not 2nd and 3rd like we saw in Alabama. And lastly, just let A.J. Swan to be composed. He shouldn't freak out if he throws an interception. Honestly, I almost encourage it because just be aggressive. Don't run it on 3rd and 6 when you're down 14 points. Try to win the game, but also don't play to not lose the game like Vanderbilt did against Alabama.
Right. The bad news for Vanderbilt is you're playing another top 10 team with an offensive line that looks formidable. So in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback, it's going to be tough to make that happen again. And they have a really strong running back room down at Ole Miss. So they got ran all over by Alabama, and they really got killed through the air. But Vanderbilt has to be careful about what they do in the running game. This could get out of hand quick. I know Andrew mentioned that Vanderbilt should get the running game going, but Ole Miss is going to try to get that going early and often. And the other thing for Vanderbilt, if they want to contend at all, or you're looking at a key to this game, Ole Miss has been a team of 2 halves this year. Much better in the first half, scoring-wise, than they are in the second half. The offense has been a bit inconsistent, and it's getting much stronger under Lane Kiffin and his program. So if there's a time to jump on them, it's the first half and get yourself some points to contend in this game. But it's really not going to be an easy one, and I'm not predicting too happy of a day for Commodore fans in Nashville, Bobby.
Unfortunately, I would have to agree. This will be a tough one. But, Vanderbilt's got to come out strong, got to come out with the fight early, with the home crowd, getting back at home after the bye. Hopefully he's able to have made those adjustments from the Alabama game. And I would love to see them establish the run early and let, like you said, Andrew, let Swan play. And, really try to take shots to try to force Ole Miss into, playing on their heels early. Maybe a different style of play. I don't know what that would necessarily look like, but, something where we can have, sort of evolved plays where it's a little bit unpredictable. And, the defense needs to be better on 3rd downs, which I think they will be. I think they'll study the tape. Again, the staff at football is, an incredible staff, and they really want everyone to succeed, and they I think, analyze film really well in helping their guys prepare for the next week. But this is going to be a tough one. Ole Miss has a really good quarterback in Jackson Dart. He's a transfer from USC, but he's been playing really well this year. So Vanderbilt's going to have a tough time contending against him. But I think it'll be a game where hopefully Vanderbilt can surprise some people. And while I don't necessarily think it'll be a win, it'll be one I think it'll be a lot closer than people expect. So now over to the pitch, where Vanderbilt soccer has amassed an 8-1-2 record on the year, having won or tied in their last 3 games, all against SEC competition. The Commodores have rebounded well, following their 2-1 defeat to LSU on September 18th, defeating Kentucky and Missouri 2-0 each, and tying Auburn 1-1. Vanderbilt finds itself tied for first with Tennessee in the SEC East standings. So, fellas, this is clearly a formidable team that Darren Ambrose has put together that has shown they can score at a high clip and defend just as well. So what has stood out to you guys about their recent performances?
I mean, they outscored their opponents 5-1, 89th minute equalizer against Auburn, and they showed grit and they showed fight. But something to really, we always say it that he's a Corbin type. Ambrose always gets these student athletes when there's a bad game and there's a loss. It's not like the losing streak continues. Always gets back in the winning streak. Always, there's a sense of identity. Going back to the football team, Clark Lee always says, "Hey, this team means identity. This team, this is what we're striving for." That's what this soccer team has. That's why there's been such a powerhouse, because there's identity. No matter who's on the field, they will play a Vanderbilt type of play. And really impressed with Rachel Jareski, who scored in the 33rd minute, and Alex Wagner, who scored in the 49th minute. And they outshot UTK 13-6. And just really impressed with this entire squad.
Definitely. Jonah, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's been the defense. We talked about a lot last week or 2 weeks ago about, do we sound the alarms on this team after the LSU loss? And I said, no, this team is built the right way. They're coached really well, a lot of good players, and most importantly, they are really strong defensively. Alex Wagner won SEC Defensive Player of the Week after the Missouri game, and it seems like this team always has a chance to at least tie the game, if not take the lead. We're talking in the 80th minute, the 85th minute, the 89th minute. And that speaks more to, even though they have a formidable offense, a really, really strong fundamental defensive squad. And that's the team we have this year, and that's the reason they're doing so well.
Definitely. And the defense has been incredibly strong, but the offense has also been strong as well. Getting 2 goals against Kentucky, and before the end of the first half, and then as soon as the second half opens up, is huge. Wagner had a beautiful lofted shot from the edge of the box that went in. It was kind of like a miracle shot, to be honest. And then against Missouri, they were battling all game 0-0. You were thinking, okay, maybe they're going to draw, right? Maybe we're just going to get 1 point out of this. But then Vanderbilt got 2 goals in the 87th and 89th minutes. From Maddie Baker, who had her first collegiate goal, and then Alex Kerr. So this team has a lot of different threats, a lot of different players that can score when you necessarily need to. They against Auburn, the 17th minute, Auburn scores, but Vanderbilt comes back with an 89th minute goal to tie the game and get the point there. So when 11 Missouri players were in the box and the shot deflected off the goalkeeper. So this is a really confident squad, and they, I think, have a lot to be proud of and a lot that they're playing for. So to you guys, what does this team need to do to keep going and keep doing what they're doing as SEC play continues?
So I think they're only averaging 14.5 shots per game. That's 12 in the SEC. Get more shots on net, and that starts with more give and goes, getting players open, and maybe take some shots out of the box. Maybe believe in your foot, and I think that's a good possibility to what could change and help them in that statistic. And then they're 6th in the SEC with 2.45 goals, and I've been really, really impressed with their shots percentage-wise are way more successful than other teams in the conference. And kind of like what you said earlier with the defense, just continue to be fierce and be powerful and be gritty on the defense and play 90 minutes of good soccer.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think, Andrew, you hit it on the head. The contradiction here is they're taking some of the least shots in the SEC but converting on the most of them. And that's great, and that's working for them now. And, again, backed by that strong defensive unit, that's something that's going to work for this team and be a winning formula for this team. But going forward and talking about playing tougher opponents and getting into deeper play into this season, yeah, get more shots on goal. Even if the percentage goes down a little bit, there are going to be games where you're not going to convert on every shot, where there's going to be really strong defensive fronts and great goalkeepers. So keep getting more shots up there, even if they're not all of the quality that you want to. Taking shots on goal, you never know what might happen. And let this defense, rely on this defense to pick you up afterwards. And this team, the sky's the limit, honestly.
Definitely. I would agree with everything you both said. I mean, this team is going to lean on their top scorers. Reagan Kelly has 5 goals and 8 assists in 11 games. Rachel Jareski has 5 goals and 3 assists in 10 games. Alex Kerr has 4 goals in 11 games. So there's 3 others tied with 2 goals. So this team can get offense from anyone, and the defense is strong as ever. So I'm really looking forward to watching Vanderbilt soccer keep playing and continue to grow. And then, as you guys said, get more shots on goal, keep converting, and play the strong defense. So that'll do it for this week's edition of VU Sports Wired. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. We'll have you up to date for all Vanderbilt sports, football and soccer. So see you next week.